Hey everybody, how's it going? Yay! Happy everything. I hope everybody's doing well. The topic I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to talk about topics for informative speeches. And this is something that can really cause you a lot of stress at times. And so I wanted to just sort of discuss a way to make it less stressful, perhaps. Now, for some folks, like with the informative topic, you're trying to pick something that is informative, meaning topics which are less controversial. The history of ping pong would be the ultimate example of that, I think. The Chili Pepper speech, that's the sample speech that I have a link to, is another example of something that's fairly not controversial. The mating rituals of tree frogs. Those are all not controversial topics that would be totally appropriate for you as you're putting together your speeches. However, some of you have chosen topics that are not quite so cut and dry in terms of their informative aspects. And so that's where I wanted to, sort of check in with you a little bit and discuss the possibility of putting together something that is a little bit more informative by tweaking it a little bit, adjusting it a little bit as such. So, for example, one time I had a student that came into my office and he said, "Sammy, I have the perfect informative topic." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "I'm going to do a speech about the electric chair." And I immediately thought, oh, that sounds too persuasive. It sounds very controversial. This does not sound like a ping pong topic. This does not sound like the history of the mating rituals of tree frogs. So I said, that sounds a little persuasive. Are you sure you don't want to share that for your next, save that for your next speech, then the persuasive speech? He says, no, Sammy, you don't understand. I don't want to talk about the death penalty or any kind of capital punishment. I literally want to talk about the electric chair. I want to talk about the history of the chair, how it works, the different types of chairs that were out there, and etc. So, and it worked. He did that speech and it was not persuasive at all. It was a truly informative speech. So the point of that story is that almost anything can be turned into an informative speech, but sometimes it has to be tweaked a little bit. So try to make it less heavy-handed. Try not to call for a policy. Maybe look at different sides to things, perhaps. By looking at things from two sides, then you are not as persuasive. For example, if you're doing a speech on the effects of coffee and you only talk about the negative effects of coffee, then you're kind of headed down that persuasive road. If you do a speech about coffee and you only talk about the positive effects of coffee, then you're also kind of headed down that persuasive road. So maybe talk about how, coffee can have some positive effects and some negative effects as well, or the history of coffee would be another thing that one could discuss in terms of coffee, and then avoid the persuasive route. I once had a student that started off doing a speech about tea, which seemed like it was informative, but then this person ended up spending a long time in their speech berating coffee drinkers to the extent that it crossed over to being sort of an anti-coffee speech and almost trying to persuade people to not have coffee. That's where that person had sort of crossed the line. So it's just about trying to take a topic and make it more informative and less persuasive. That's how one could do that and avoid certain problems. There's a big difference between someone, for example, doing a speech about Bernie Sanders, for example, and it's an informative speech about the life of Bernie Sanders, versus someone trying to encourage people to vote for Bernie Sanders. If you're trying to talk about the life of Bernie Sanders and his political career and his accomplishments as an informative, I think that would work. And also, though, however, if you were talking about like you should vote for Bernie Sanders in 2020 or whenever the next election is, then you're running into an issue of getting a little persuasive. So it's all about that balance. And then there's other topics, like I said earlier, that are obviously very informative just by their nature. So, for example, if you're talking about the topic of water ballet, chances are that's going to be informative by its nature. And that doesn't mean you couldn't be excited about your topic. So if you're giving a speech about water ballet and you're kind of a fan of water ballet, it's okay to be enthusiastic about your topic. that's not too persuasive. So everything kind of exists on this spectrum between informative and persuasive. And for this informative speech, we're kind of trying to veer into that informative range as much as possible. Be excited about the topic, but not try to push your opinion on people too much. That's easy if the topic is, obviously informative, like the history of bubblegum. And it's less easy if you have something that kind of borders a little bit on something that's a little bit persuasive. So for example, if you're giving a speech about different abortion procedures, that's harder to discuss and keep it informative. There's a tendency. So it depends on the topic, but each can be handled as long as they're handled carefully. So with that in mind, I think have fun with the informative speech. Enjoy it. Be enthusiastic. And then for those of you that do have those super controversial topics that you're excited about, that's awesome. That's great. We're looking forward to those speeches next time, which is that we're going to have a persuasive topic right after the informative speeches, where you can take on that super controversial issue and take a stand on it and push your opinion and encourage people to do this or that and talk about new laws and new policies. That's totally for the persuasive realm. So in no way am I trying to censor you or keep you from, saying your opinion, because that's what this class is all about, particularly when we get to the persuasive speech. All right. Thanks so much for watching, and hope we'll see you online.